the first ever Sport Impact digital platform, and there is nobody better to start this program than the UAE's favourite, Tatiana Antonelli, sustainability leader extraordinaire and genuine inspiration to what we've been trying to achieve. So Tatiana, a very warm welcome, and I will not do you justice by introducing you. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your amazing business in Goumbook?
Thank you so much, Sean. And actually, we love to be part of the first. We feel that Goumbook has always been the first in different things, and we like to be part of, movements that want to create something new and have a positive impact. So we're very, very glad to partner with you and the Sport Impact Summit and everything that's around it. So Goumbook is a social enterprise that we started back in 2009. So this year we're turning 15.
Wow.
And the idea at that time was to change the narrative around not even sustainability, I would say really going green. That was the buzzword of 2009. And unfortunately, it was mostly considered a trend from Europe, from the US, not really something that was needed or a priority for the region. And that's also the way we decided to choose our name, Goumbook. Goum is related to the tribe living in the UAE, but around the region, the tribe that would travel around the desert, being very sustainable. So they were, sharing resources, never wasting anything, a very strong sense of community. So welcoming anyone to travel together, share experiences, share the journey. And this is where we decided, okay, let's try to build again this Goum, this family, this tribe that wants to make a difference, that wants to go back to that life where things were more linked to nature, where we had less chemicals in our life, less negative impact, less busy times and technologies that sometimes are too much around what we do. And let's understand what it means to live in the desert, right? Because we all came here with that feeling of, okay, I will go to the UAE for a couple of years for a change of scenery, maybe an opportunity in our careers. And sometimes people would just completely forget where they are and the impact they have, and the fact that this is a very specific ecosystem around us, right? It's the desert, an arid world. The perception is that it's empty, an empty spot of sand, which is all wrong.
Yeah.
It's a very lively environment, wonderful ecosystem, full of plants and flowers, shrubs and animals of all types. It's just that it's different from what we've experienced back home. So Goumbook was really born out of this necessity to bring people back in contact with nature and understand that whatever impact we have here or back home, it is a global impact. The air we breathe here is the same air people will breathe kilometers away. The water we pollute here, it will pollute the water for everyone. So then the narrative changed massively, not only around the world, but also here in the region. And today we talk about sustainability, we talk about climate action, and we see governments taking really incredible steps towards signing the Paris Agreement and hosting here in the UAE the COP28 and really passing laws and decrees that are changing the way we do business today and will do business for the next 20 years.
Yeah, I mean, it must have been amazing. In 2009, you were so early to the party that you must have taken an immense amount of determination to be that far ahead and then see the sort of follow-up coming. Did that prepare you probably better for the changes that you saw coming? And as you mentioned, things like government getting involved and legislation. Were you ready for that when it came, do you think?
No, I think to look at Goumbook, we grew with the movement, I would say. So it's been a journey, it continues to be a journey, and it's been based on first awareness and education, that aspect of changing mindsets. Why do we need to do this? And then while things were evolving and growing, we've been growing and evolving at the same time. So I think it's been surfing the wave. At the beginning, it was really hard, and I think, as you may know, Goumbook worked on a volunteer base for 6 years. So 6 years of people really working together to change the perception, change mindsets. And suddenly something happened where finally there was this need to change. It came through, I would say, a global awareness that came from major organizations such as the UN and events such as the Paris Agreement, but then the Sustainable Development Goals, which became widely more, I think, aware and reaching any sort of community, talking about, those tiny, colorful squares that were very simple to understand, talking about education, talking about poverty, talking about war, talking about different things that are easy to understand. And then, of course, depending on who the stakeholder is, you go deeper into these sustainable development goals and you engage in a way where you change the community, you change the way you do business, you change the way you do policy. And I think it's been something that has influenced the whole world. And finally, it's also where we've seen the private sector working more with the public sector, saying, okay, how can we do this together? And as you know, here in the region and in the UAE, we have this tremendous opportunity of things being done very fast.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Action is immediate.
And do you think there was a point where, as you said, that there was suddenly a change where everyone started to get on board with it? And I think that my perception, and I'm very late to this party, my perception was that it was only about climate change initially. And that, you're right, climate has no borders, which is an interesting challenge. And then suddenly people are beginning to understand what the social impacts are of something like climate change. And now you have got more simplistic models to understand for private and public sector. Were you there at the beginning just focused on climate, or did you see the broader sort of sustainability benefits from early on?
I think we started with reconnecting people to nature, because at the end of the day, some topics such as climate action or sustainability are so broad that people have always looked at these things being linked to government and policies. But if you want to change and have a positive impact, you need to have the community on board.
Yeah.
You need every single effort to happen, not just at the policy level. And to drive policy change, you need people to ask for it. You need private sector to ask for it. They need to support each other. And this is where we really focus on awareness and education. Until today, all our campaigns start from awareness and education, because maybe within us, we give it for granted, right? We talk so much about bigger actions in climate, but we forget that a lot of people today and a lot of SMEs still don't really understand the role they can play and why it's important. So even when we talk about climate, it's about nature. It's about, for example, the role of the oceans, and people don't really know why. Why is the ocean important for climate? It's because oceans help regulate, temperatures and currents, and the ocean absorbs tons of CO2. So if suddenly you have that ecosystem failing, everything is going to start failing. But are we teaching this in schools? No. So that's the point.
Yeah, no, I think you touched on something there that is incredibly relevant to what we set out to do with the Sport Impact Summit. It was clear that for us to have an impact, we have to get more players on our pitch. And you're right about the SMEs, and there was the sense that it's not my problem to fix, and the government will fix it. And then you start now to see the bottom-up pressure, consumers saying, I prefer that brand for that reason. And that to me was the moment where sport could get its arms around this properly. We know that sport has a wider cultural influence than anything else on the planet. And that was really where we saw the Sport Impact series coming together and driving at that. And that really sort of brings me to the program that you introduced, which was Mangroves United. So tell us a bit about how Mangroves United came about and your vision for it.
Well, I think everything happens for a reason, and also us meeting at that time where we were looking at launching Mangroves United and you wanting to engage with all the sports community was fantastic. Mangroves United is about raising awareness about mangroves. Mangroves play a very important role from a biodiversity perspective, coastal protection, but also in terms of climate, they sequester a lot of carbon. And you can find mangroves all around the world. It's a circle basically around the planet where many countries have incredible and immense forests, mangrove forests. But when you talk to people about trees and carbon sequestration, they will immediately think about Amazonic forests or those large forests in the north of the US or in Europe. Rarely someone will talk to you about mangrove forest.
Yeah, so that's really interesting in our sports world. So when you apply the high performance conversation to nature, am I right in saying that mangroves are 6 to 8 times better at sequestering carbon than the rainforests?
Absolutely.
So if that is the case, if we're picking our biodiversity team, why aren't we doing more with mangroves globally?
That's a very good question, and I think it's timely, and a lot is happening around mangroves. So at COP28, actually, they launched Mangrove Breakthrough, which is an initiative to bring together policymakers and private sector to fund projects around the world to protect mangroves. I think what is really important today is to understand that we need more protection and conservation rather than planting. We've heard so much in the past 20 years about tree planting. Yes, tree planting is important, but our main focus is about protecting what we have today. Because to replant trees, it will take them 10 years to become mature enough then to start sequestering carbon. So priority number 1 is protect what we have. So initiatives such as the Mangrove Breakthrough and organizations such as the Global Mangrove Alliance have played a very important role to really look at conservation efforts and then maybe later restoration, where you need to support and plant in order to restore. But again, this tree is not known enough, and what we realize is that within our circle we've been planting trees, we've been planting in the desert to raise awareness about the local biodiversity, planting mangroves as well for the same reason. But we needed to tap into a different kind of audience. And when I see my children, 3 boys, what is it that they really are following with all their heart? It's sports. Who's going to be their role models? It's athletes that are achieving incredible successes in the sports industry. So I thought, why don't we look at those athletes, those champions, to become champions for nature? And talk to all their massive amounts of followers and tell them, yes, sports is amazing, but how can we do sports without a planet that supports us?
Yeah.
And it's all about nutrition. You need to be fit and hydrated, and you need clean air. Don't go out if the air is not clean. Well, we need a healthy nature to be able to do sports. We need a really big team to support nature. So this nature that surrounds the planet, mangroves, I think are a very nice symbolic way to be able to look at us as a global community, looking at protecting this ecosystem, but also this ecosystem is in between land and sea. It's a coastal protection, it engages with communities, it's a biodiversity miracle. At the same time, it has this incredible potential to sequester carbon. So you can talk to people about all these different things with one tree, they learn about so much
Yeah.
more, right?
Yeah, and I think that was, there's a number of things in there that were fascinating for us. And obviously you're absolutely right, Mangroves United came at exactly the right time, but the educational impact on us was huge. And we had this amazing day where we went down and we went actually out and we were planting mangroves, but it was more the broader education around it. But I kind of kept going back to, I guess, my old sort of stomping ground of sports performance. You've got something that is faster growing and is minimum six times more powerful and effective. And that to me was, why hasn't sport really got into this? Because we are, sport's quite good in some places, and it's got lots of tree planting initiatives, and obviously my one in cricket is classic for that. But it kind of feels like you're in the slow lane, and time in sport is a massive thing, right? You play for 90 minutes in football, you play cricket for 20 overs or 5 days in some cases. But Mangroves United is the kind of T20 version of biodiversity for sport. And what we hope to see is all of our sports community and Sport Impact Summit getting behind it. And if it is about protection, let's all get behind protection. And that's the big opportunity for us. So, thank you for bringing it to us, absolutely huge. But you've got so many other projects. So talk to me a little bit about, you have sustainability projects all around the place, and really interesting that education plays such a big thing for you. So touch on that a little bit, because I've seen you've done an air quality program recently. You've got a food waste program. I mean, it really is comprehensive.
Yes.
Pick a few of your favorites.
Well, I think it's important to understand that we don't want to depress people. And I think when you talk about all these important aspects of climate and sustainability, most of the time it's about very heavy data that looks, terrible scenarios ahead if we don't take action. But most of the time there's this lack of showing the solution to people. So everything we do at a small scale really looks at awareness and education, but also solution. So guys, look at this. We have an issue. We are wasting too much food. 1/3 of the food we produce today goes to waste. And we're dealing with hunger. That food would feed the world. So when we look at the food waste aspect, of course, what is the solution? It's to understand, one, behavior change. How are we purchasing food and how are we wasting it? Two, do we have solutions around us? And for example, here in the UAE, we have a few startups that are really supporting the reducing the waste. Some aspects that people might not be aware of is that, for example, most of the waste comes from, and we call it actually food loss, not food waste, is at the source, from the farms. A lot of the fruits and vegetables are perfectly fine and nutritious, but because they don't look all the same and they don't have the same size and they're not perfectly round, they're not sold in supermarkets. And all that goes straight into landfill with a massive impact for climate in terms of greenhouse gas emissions, specifically methane, which is really, really bad, 10 times worse than CO2. Also, we live in an area, in a region where most of the food is imported. So that again also goes to waste through the time it took to come here. When it arrives here, it might not be good enough, and then it goes into the shelves. We buy too much of it, stays in our fridge. Oh, I didn't eat it. We chuck it, and it's waste again. So we really need to look at the solutions we can implement at home, but also, let's say, in the hospitality world or in restaurants. Indoor air quality, again, it's something that we always look at, the outdoor air. Specifically, sports people. Am I going to run? Am I going to cycle? Because actually the air sometimes is not good enough around the world. But we never think, but how is the air at home or in the office? If I give you a glass of water, you might taste it, smell it, look at it. If there's something wrong, you're not going to touch it. Are you thinking the same way with air? We take more than 20,000 breaths a day. Do we ever ask ourselves, what am I breathing? And there's so much in indoor air that actually is affecting our development, our brain, and specifically in children.
Yeah.
And that's something we wanted to raise awareness. And this is something we wanted to raise awareness about, but also look at solutions, which are very simple. You can reduce the amount of chemicals you use in the house, put a air purifier. There are some paints that actually will absorb VOCs. So this is the great news, right? Anything we do, we can change, and there are solutions out there that can help.
Yeah, and I think that's amazing that you're going through this educational program, right? And this is a part of our challenge. Also, our mutual challenge is we've got to educate. In my world, we've got to coach people. But what we're coaching is behavioural change. How do we get you to do something differently? And there's lots of technology. There's amazing solutions out there. But actually, it boils down to, again, getting more people on the pitch doing one little thing different, whether that is purification of water or air in the home. If everyone does it, it's about volume, and sport does lend itself to that, and that's kind of all about what our mission is to reach 1 billion people. But on that journey, we've got to educate and coach. And food is an interesting example because clearly, we had an amazing masterclass at the summit in December. Dr. John Ingram from Oxford University came and talked about the food system. And it's not, what I learned was it's not just about what you see on the shelves. It's actually what goes on behind the scenes. And that's a program, the masterclass program, which Sport Impact is launching this year. How do you see us taking this to the sort of C-suites and the corporates to help them not only make them aware of it, but drive some solutions? Because people will act in their own best interests. So that's something that we're really excited about. How do you see the corporate world adapting to that kind of coaching, training experience?
I think there's a huge need for it. And actually, when you did that masterclass during the summit, I truly enjoyed it. First, because there was a lot of data sharing. And I think for corporates today, what the need is at the start is data. So you need to assess yourself. So most of the corporates, what they do before they start any sustainability strategy or implementation, they will try to understand how they're doing. How are my carbon emissions, and how much do I waste, and how much do I consume in terms of energy or water, right? But in a masterclass, you go into things that are bigger than you, and you hear also from best practices. So one, you're inspired to do something because others have done it. So you understand it's possible. Second, you have all the data that you can bring back to your teams and to your leadership saying, okay, guys, these are the issues globally, let's say, let's measure on our side. And second, let's do it because look, they've done it. Best practices are very, very important, especially for the SMEs, because for larger corporations, they have the means to be, the first players out there and do the right thing, but they also have the budgets. Where is the biggest impact? It's in the SMEs. They are massively impactful, and if they don't come on board of this game, we're not going to make it.
Yeah, no, I think that, again, that's for me is the secret to this. And for us, back to this, what are we all about and what Sport Impact trying to achieve is that scoreboard. We live and breathe in sport by a scoreboard, a clock, and getting corporates to understand what is their scoreboard is the first step. And I thought, that came out very strongly from that masterclass. And I think the other thing that is really important is taking out the jargon. I think the big fear with most SMEs is when you're talking about sustainability, their first question, this is difficult.
Yeah.
And that's partly because the language it takes some areas which they're not that familiar with. And one of the things we see our roles at is to sort of de-jargonize it. And sport's brilliant for that because it's a global language, and that's one of the things we want to sort of drive through these masterclasses. But I think that we've been inspired by Mangroves United. We've been inspired by your sort of vision, because you were so far ahead of the curve, right back from 2009. honoured to have you on our first ever podcast, and congratulations, I see, on the recent Ajman Community Award as well. So you're winning the trophies left, right and centre. So just to sort of wrap this up, what is your call to action, Tatiana, for the corporate community of how to engage with sport to deliver against some of those objectives?
I think there are two ways of looking at it. The first one is, of course, how do you reach the public, and how do you communicate with them, and how do you create that community that wants to change. But we also need to look at sports as a massive industry that moves trillions of dollars around the world, that has a huge impact in terms of supply chain. So that is not just money, but it's also influence. If you think that doing one thing, asking for one change within this industry, within this sector, could trickle down to not only the public and the community, but to the ecosystem. Let's ask for certifications, let's ask for a change or more information, more data. Where is this coming from? How are you doing this? More transparency and accountability. This is massive, and such an industry could have an incredible impact. So honestly, I see the potential. It's so clear, we all see it. And it's just about convincing the first players to start this game, and things will happen.
Well, thank you, Tatiana. I mean, as I say, inspirational. We're super excited about working together on Mangroves United. We've got some amazing plans together for certainly 2025 and onwards. And let's get out there and make it happen.
Yes.